Hey guys, 'tis Wednesday again. Welcome, welcome. How are you guys? I'm a little behind the 8 ball right this minute, I'll be honest with you. Trying to do some homeschool. Hey guys. Okay. Hey there, welcome, 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 welcome. Today we're going to be talking about faith. It's going to be a fun one. Waiting on my sister. She's not coming on. There she is. Okay, hold on. Adding her in here. Oh, Nelly. Hey,
Hey.
I was like, she's not coming. She's giving up on
Well,
me.
it didn't notify me per usual, but I was able to finagle, look up your profile, and find you right there.
I'm
Hello.
glad you can look up my profile.
Yes, I remembered your name this time,
That's
so it
good.
helped.
Hey, Rose. Welcome,
Let me
guys.
see. Sometimes I can see comments, but maybe I need to restart my app because I can't see who's on, and I'll say hi to y'all later. But as you're hopping on, say hi to us so we can give you a shout out. It is Wednesday. How was everyone's weekend? How was your weekend, Wen? What did you do?
Oh my goodness, perfectly timed for this topic. I was at a church conference
Oh,
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then of course church on Sunday. Just wrecked. Cried,
faith-filled weekend.
cried a lot, sang a
Yeah.
lot, like lost my voice.
Cried because of all the like revelations that you felt.
Just feeling like I never thought of it like that. Stuff like that.
That's a cute face. That's a really cute face you
Oh,
have
it's
there.
really cute, for sure. I had
Um,
so much mascara. People were like face down on this really tremendously dirty, gross floor. You know,
yeah.
good stuff. What'd you do?
Well, I went to we had a local work conference, if you
Oh,
can
right.
call it work. And that was also very cool and revolutionary and got me crying and feeling just very
Yay! Yay for crying.
inspired. And I just love, one of the things that they talked about, not necessarily faith derived, but the importance of kindness. And I just thought, those are so connected and how important it is to just act out of kindness. And there's never enough kindness in the world. And I just thought, man, how cool of a company to like focus on kindness, not
Totally.
like how can we increase sales or how can
Right.
we, whatever. It's like, let's focus on being better people. And I think that although I'm on a journey in faith, that is one of the underlying parts of faith is like, how can we be a better person every day? So
Totally. So
thought that was really cool.
everybody is on a journey in faith, whether you would call yourself a Christian or an atheist or whatever. Your journey doesn't end. It's a process always, right? Because
Sure.
our experience will shift thing. I mean, think of any other aspect of your life, right? Like parenting. You're not like, I'm just a parent and everything I think now will be what I think 10 years from now. No, not the case. Experience will dictate that journey for you. So everybody's on a faith journey. And you guys, we have to preface this is going to be kind of an interesting conversation because Whit and I won't say we're not on the same page so much, but we're just not in the same place in our journey. How's that, right?
Sure.
So, we're going to navigate this because someone suggested, I think it was Anne, suggested, we talk about some specific verses and whatnot. But I'm like, you know what, we need to back way out and talk more generally about faith because we've never really talked about that. And so before we dive too far into that, who the heck are you?
Hello. Well, this is Wen and Wit. This is What Do We Know with Wen and Wit, where we will bring perspective, education, and inspiration about some hot topics and meet somewhere in the middle. My name is Whitney, and I am a mom to my son Dylan with a baby on the way. I live in Northern California. I'm a wife and a small business owner, and we're just trucking along over here.
We're sisters also. We don't often say that. And maybe
Oh,
if people don't
that's
know
true.
us, they might be like, who are these? They just have names that sound the same, you know? We're sisters. I'm Wendy, and I am a wife and a mom and a business owner, blogger, author, speaker. I'm actually wrapping up. I'm on the last chapter of my first book. That is, I wrote a chapter of a book that is published. So I can already claim the name of author, but I've never written an entire book by myself or you know, where I'm the only contributor to that book. I'm on the last chapter, so
Woohoo!
and it goes in line with this conversation, actually. So I actually just today signed the contract for my publishing agreement. So I'm like, we're coming to
It's happening.
I guess I better finish and like make it real. So I also write a blog. Yay, Sierra says. gainingmyperspective.com. Check it out. Go subscribe to my newsletter. I email once a month out of that blog, and I try to post once a week on the blog. So just kind of finding my voice as a writer is what that blog's been about. But
oh, and also I just wanted, on your blog, you have the YouTube link.
Yes.
And I only bring this up, I know it's in our little subject of this video, but I had a bunch of people at the conference this weekend come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I've been watching your lives. I love them, which thank you guys so much. That's so good to hear. But they also said, you know, have you guys ever talked about this? Or I caught the end of this one. How would I find it? YouTube is the best way to find it, you guys. So you can either go natively to youtube.com and search for us, or I think the quickest, easiest, accessible way that's the way you say it.
I've never heard that before, but you have all kinds of language I don't know about.
Well,
you can go
I'm trying to get
native to the YouTube.
Like you can go to the source of YouTube and find it, or
that's good.
Might be more streamlined to go to Wendy's blog, check out a few blogs that she's written, subscribe to her newsletter, and then the YouTube channel link is there, and you can see all the topics that we've talked about. It's much more orderly than trying to find them on here.
Well, let's dive in before we get too much of your time wasted here. We're talking about faith. Where do you guys stand on faith? Would you, I hate to use terms that might be over your head if you're not someone who is very involved in a faith, but the term believer is something, are you a believer? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in Jesus? Like, where are you at? What's your faith? Pop that in the old comments so we know who we're chatting with, and I hope there's some diversity out there for sure. And then, of course, if you guys have topics, always we want to hear about them. Hopefully you took notes at the conference about who wants us to say what, because we're always looking for topics as to what you guys want to hear us talk about. So, Whit, diving in, what do you believe about God and Jesus? Where would you put yourself on the journey of faith?
Well, it's kind of a hard question for me to answer. I think some people may obviously enthusiastically say, yes or no. I am somewhere in the middle. I'm still kind of exploring what God and Jesus means to me, I guess. I've done a Bible study that I found to be very eye-opening, and it aligned a lot with, how I feel. I found this study? Seamless. I don't remember the author. Do you remember?
Angie Smith.
Angie Smith. I felt very empowered to not be an idiot when people talk about, the Bible and Christianity. I thought it was really interesting in that regard. And also just kind of knowing all of these, I know it's not stories is the right word, but the various stories in the Bible.
That's a fine word.
Okay. Yeah. I don't mean it in any disrespectful way, but the stories in the Bible kind of gave new meaning to what I've heard my whole life. And I said, oh my gosh, like that's incredible that something like that, has happened. And then it just layered and layered and layered. And for that, it was really cool. I do have some questions and hesitations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this Facebook Live. I do believe in a higher power. I do believe that Jesus existed. So, I'm definitely not on the atheist side of things. I would say I'm somewhere between agnostic and, a full-on believer.
Okay.
And the last thing I feel about that would be that I love a lot of what the morals of the Bible
Sure.
have.
Mm-hmm.
The Ten Commandments, I think, are a very good framework for how to live your life.
Mm-hmm.
I do love that the overlying message is like, be a good person. I think that's really important no matter what you believe. So that's kind of what I think. What about you?
With the 10 Commandments, would you say you don't need the 10 Commandments to know not to kill, not to steal, not to cheat on your spouse, right? Like, would you say that it's because of the 10 Commandments that you're like, I should probably abide by that? Or is that in you?
I would say well, it's not in everyone because there's a lot of people who deviate from that.
Anyone's going to deviate, but do you know the rightness and the wrongness of that without the 10 Commandments? Does that make sense?
Yes, I do feel like I would know right from wrong.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then
why do you ask that?
Just because, to me, that's evidence of God that it's in us already. It's not that someone said you shouldn't murder and we're like, oh yeah, like morality is part of our design, right? Like that was his plan. That was part of our design. So obviously I sit, as you guys can probably tell already, if you know me at all, I sit on the other side of the spectrum. I wouldn't even say on the other side of the spectrum, just further down the journey in terms of, faith is absolutely the center point of my life, my motivations, our family, the whole shebang. But I think it's important to say, and this is kind of the crux of, or the premise of my book project, is I started as an atheist where I did not believe that Jesus even existed. And I didn't know that you really can't believe that. Jesus is a very, very documented historical person, just Jesus of Nazareth, that is, whether or not you believe he's the Son of God, Jesus, the man, is absolutely existed. That's not an argument, right? I didn't even know that much. I was just completely I don't believe in that, and I don't believe in Jesus, and I don't believe in that, and I don't have any desire to really venture down that path. And we're going to talk a little bit about where that comes from, like where your faith platform kind of starts as a teenager or young adult,
impressionable.
Yes, but you
person.
wrote here in your notes, and you didn't say this. You said you want to be faith-filled, but you're not ready to dive in. What is your hesitation?
Well, I thought we were going to discuss that down.
So that's
I did address
because of your hesitations. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, again, I hope you guys are super excited about my book, because I hope you are. I don't know who would be if you guys aren't. But it's kind of starts, the title of the book is What If You're Wrong? And that is kind of the question that my husband, who was raised in the church, and really challenged me with, because we kind of came head to head in the beginning of our relationship. I didn't know he was a Christian right out of the gate, which says something about the level of his faith when we first met. And that
How do you mean, like it wasn't very strong?
Yes, and the Bible says you need the faith of a mustard seed. Yes, I have nail polish all over my fingers. Sorry about that. You need the faith of a mustard seed. So he didn't have very active faith, I guess, but he was very rooted in his faith. So I missed entirely that he was a Christian. We were already dating and too far gone to just be like, oh, we're going to break up over this. Like, I was like, dang it, you're a Christian, son of a duh. I had a very negative perception of Christianity. So we came head to head. Thanks, Rose. We came head to head on that. And he challenged me with, well, what if you're wrong? Which, of course, your response is what? When someone says that to you, what do you say back?
Sorry, I was looking at the comment that Rose made. Can you repeat that question?
No, I was not listening to you. When someone says, well, what if you're wrong? What do you respond back with? What's your sassafras answer back?
Oh, I don't have a sassafras answer.
Your answer is, well, what if you're wrong? Right? Like, that's your defensive posture.
I mean, there's not really, I would say there's not really a way to know unless you know, like, in your heart and believe it.
Well, that was what he was pushing me on. Is, well, what if you're wrong? And I responded, well, what if you're wrong? And he said, if I'm wrong, it costs me nothing. If God is real and I believe in him, or if God is not real, but I believe, it costs me nothing. But if God is real and you don't believe, it costs you everything, right? And he didn't say it to cheapen his faith. Like he was very assured in what he believed in. So he wasn't saying, you know, I may be right, I might be wrong. But what he was saying is, you better know for sure that what you think is really what you think. Because if God is real and you just never did the work to figure out whether or not you really believe in it or not, which is true. I had not done much work to really investigate. That would be pretty costly. And I knew, of course, yeah, if you believe in God, you got to believe in, you know, like I knew enough to know that you had to believe in him and you had to do what he said in order to get into heaven, as a general, like that was my general understanding. Right. So I'm like, okay, that's fair to say that, yeah, if I don't believe and God is real, I'm going to be pretty screwed come eternity, you know, if all that's real. So I was like, that's fair.
Come eternity.
That's fair. I should probably, and I went into my research with the posture of, I'm not wrong though. This is going to be so easy to poke holes through, like the Bible and faith and God, and like, there's just no proof of God is what my posture. So I'm just like, this is going to be a walk in the park to just shoot holes through his arguments. And that's not what I found, you know, as I walked in. And so anyway, the book is kind of that unraveling for me, just the uncovering of different things I just did not know or understand, and encountering a lot of the questions that you're going to ask me here in a minute. And figuring out what I thought about that, asking Thomas, you know, further questions about all of these really hard issues that keep people from fully jumping into faith. So I went through all that, and that's the concept of the book. But at the beginning here, right, like when I started investigating, you know, what do I even believe? Because we're quick to say what we believe, like
what we don't believe.
Yeah, what we don't believe is probably easiest. And then if I were to articulate what I did believe, that was even more tricky. But then when my husband would say, well, why do you believe that? I had nothing. I knew what I didn't believe in. I barely knew what I did believe in. And I could not give an articulate answer as to why I believed in what I just said I believed in. So that was, you know, my pride was hit in that. And I went on a journey to investigate, why do I believe that there's no God? Like, where did that even come from? Do you know what I mean? And so I started to unpack it. And it comes from, you know, just in our story, our grandmother, very, very influential person in our life, in our young life. You know, she passed away when I was 18. I would say she was even like a parent, you know, she was very much like a parent to us, was an atheist. Like she would sit on absolutely an atheist. Okay. So that's obviously influencing my mom. And I don't know if my mom would fully say she was an atheist or maybe in the agnostic category, but I think she'd lean more in the atheist direction. I don't mean to put words in her mouth. She can comment and say otherwise. And then my dad, I just wouldn't have any idea. I never even had.
Well, he was raised Catholic.
He was raised Catholic, but I would say he did not have a faith, to my knowledge. Never said God or Jesus outside of a curse word, right? So I just didn't have it in my upbringing. So it just wasn't at all a part of my life, wasn't a part of my thought process whatsoever. So that's a piece of it. If you're on the opposite side, and I'll challenge you in this, if you were raised in the church, you might discover as an adult that what you were taught actually isn't what you believe anymore either, right? I mean, there's a lot of different denominations. There's a lot of different journeys that'll take you close to the truth. But maybe as you investigate as an adult, you're like, you know what? I don't even know why we believe that as my denomination or whatever. So I would challenge anyone to go back and, where did your beliefs come from? Where did they start? Like, who influenced them? Because it's going to be your parents. It's going to be your grandparents. It's going to be your peers. It's going to be your teachers, because I learned about the Big Bang Theory and I learned about evolution. I did not learn about creation. So what am I going to...
But what if you went to a religious focused school.
Absolutely. You're going to be on the flip side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and again, you only are basing your beliefs especially in your youth, off of what you're being given.
Right.
And
Very
so,
limited
exactly.
exposure.
So if you never go back and look at the other side, or I mean, if you are a Christian who grew up in a private Christian school, maybe you do want to go look at evolution and see, like, what is that? What do people who believe in evolution think? What is the premise?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I totally encourage you to do that, because I did. I went back and looked at everything I did believe, and then I went back and looked at everything my husband believed, and I just wanted to know why. Why do you believe this? Where did it come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another big piece of it, and you can speak to this too, is my perception of what it was to be a believer really shaped my lack of faith. And I remember specifically, and this will date me a little bit here, but I was a teenager when the Matthew Shepard stuff was happening. If you guys recall that, up in Laramie, Wyoming, essentially
Mm-hmm.
the first hate crime, the first gay bashing.
Media,
right? Very, very
driven
media
hate crime.
driven. Yeah. I was really influenced by the way that, and I'm going to say the church showed up in that. I don't mean to be, I know that the people that are yelling the loudest don't necessarily represent the whole picture. I know that now.
Mm-hmm.
But what I saw on the news was a lot of people that say they stand for love and Jesus and the Bible and love your brother, who are spewing absolute hatred. And so my perception of hypocrisy and
Mm-hmm.
of, you say you stand for this, but you don't stand for that, like, that totally influenced my beliefs as well, right? I would say probably that's your story as well, or maybe you can kind of
Yeah.
add in
I
whatever.
would say that that's a huge part of it, and it's interesting you would use the word perception, because I guess that is the best way to say it. But there have been a lot of interactions that I had previously when I was younger, which I'm not sure why there's been a shift specifically, because when I was younger, a lot of the perceptions that I was exposed to were along those same lines, very narrow-minded, kind of limited in and inclusive, or I guess exclusive, only inclusive of certain viewpoints.
Yep.
And that always really pissed me off. I didn't like that feeling of that hypocrisy, that level of hypocrisy. But
for sure,
if I were honest, in my adult life, we're talking about Christianity in particular, but I know there are other faiths. So, like, let's extend that to.
It's a good blanket term, but yeah, belief in God. Christianity refers specifically to all the denominations or sects of belief that believe in Jesus as the Son of God.
Gotcha. So Christianity, then I will stick to Christianity as the word. In my adult life, a lot of the Christians that I have been exposed to have been very loving, have been very open, have had more of what I would say a modern take on what it means to be a good Christian. And that has me more engaged and interested than ever before, because a lot of these people I admire, like, personally, like outside of their faith. And then I find that they are very grounded in their faith.
Sure.
And to me, that's more eye-opening and alluring about going further in a faith journey than hearing what you can and can't do, and how much is wrong with a certain type of people or certain. I don't identify with that at all. So yeah.
Gosh, I went to a message I heard a message at my church just maybe a month ago. It was freaking on point. Exactly what you're talking about. That a lot of times Christians think darkness shows light. If I tell you about all the darkness of, like, if you do XYZ, you're going to go to hell, and let me talk to you about damnation, and let me talk to you about the consequences of sin. Darkness does not show light. Light shows light. That's the only thing. So you cannot be about the consequence of sin. You have to be about the love of Jesus. Otherwise, do you see what I'm saying? Like, darkness only makes more darkness. Light will cut through the darkness. That you have to be about that. And that's exactly what you're describing. a perception of darkness, people talking about the
Mm-hmm.
negative aspects of being a believer and what you can and can't do and blah, 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 versus let me just love you. Let me just be about love and Jesus. That's light. That is the light side of
Right.
Christianity, right? I was like, that's what our church as a whole is missing, is focus on being the light and not talking about the darkness, you know?
That's what society is missing. Like,
amen.
that extends across
Amen.
the board. But I want to keep moving forward because we're already like so far in our time.
Guys.
But but one of the main questions that I have that I've posed to you before that has me hung up is, why does bad things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do young kids die of terminal illnesses?
Sure.
Like, that is really, really hard for me to say. A God that is so loving, why would they have something this horrific happen?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Gosh, I could write a whole book on that alone for sure. But I think to answer as quickly as possible, our God is more concerned about our eternity than our life on earth, our mortal life on earth. And God doesn't author bad things to happen. God's intention, if you read the Bible, is perfection. He created the garden. He created, and I'm no theologian, so don't send me letters, but his intention was communion with his creation without any problem, without any sin, no death. There was never supposed to be death. There was never supposed to be sickness. That was what he authored. Man, through deception of the enemy, chose sin, and that broke the creation. And God mercifully made a way back around that to where we can have perfect communion with him in Jesus. But you have to understand that was never God's intention, and he isn't authoring bad things to happen to good people, first of all. But you're totally right when what you said is, why does God allow bad things to happen? He does, and that's true. Like, he can intervene, and sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't, but it's because he's more concerned with your eternal heart posturing. And if he has to, what the enemy meant for evil, he'll use it for good. So that sin, that death, that cancer, that whatever, God is going to use that through you or through somebody else to posture your heart in a different way, in a way that you can't see. And the only way I could describe this is, have you ever had something horrendous happen to you in your life that later, years later, you look back and you go, man, that was the biggest blessing of my life. Thank God. I mean, I've been through breakups where I'm like, why? Or, where you're just crushed. Or I've had many different health issues where I'm just like, what on earth is happening? Like, why is this happening to me? Another thing that's happening to me. And then years later, you look back and you go, man, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have met that person. Or if that didn't happen, I would have thought I had, I was in absolute control of my life, and I'm not. And if God never made me realize that, I would have never turned my heart to him and ended up in heaven. He is way more concerned about you ending up in heaven than you having a stellar life here on earth, if that makes sense. So does that help answer just a little bit give just a shift in that perspective a touch?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it will give you that perspective shift. I don't know if something horrific happened, like losing a child or something like that, if I would say, gosh, that's the best thing that ever happened to me down the line.
But in heaven, you might. In heaven, you might go, gosh, that postured my heart. And now that I'm in heaven, I have that baby back in my arms. I'm so glad I'm in heaven with that baby. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so glad. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the promise, is
well,
an eternal
I could definitely see years down the line having your heart be put through something like that, then changing the way that you conduct your daily life, changing the way that you maybe have your faith, or deepen your faith, or deepen your relationship with your spouse, or whatever it may be, that it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So I can understand what you're saying.
And you might connect with somebody in a mourning group like in a moms
Right.
who've lost children's groups that will lead you to God and therefore into heaven. Do you know what I mean? Like it might be something like that that would never happen. You'd never meet that person. You'd never make that connection if you hadn't lost that baby. And again, this is, I might be pushing buttons with people that are watching this. Like, no, you don't understand my grief. And that's fair. That's totally fair. But
It takes time.
I went to a funeral of a gal who died 29, 3 babies, died in her bathroom, just complete random thing. And that funeral changed my whole life. I never met her. I knew her husband it was my husband's friend from childhood. They were celebrating at her funeral. And it reminded me, this is not the goal. We know everybody dies. Everyone who walks the earth dies. We're not here forever. So if heaven is the goal, right? If you're a believer, if you're like looking at it through that lens, heaven's the goal. She got out. Like that was their posture at the funeral, was she's out of this crazy world. Like she's in heaven. She doesn't have any pain. She's not sick. She'll never be sick again. She'll never cry another tear. Like she's good to go. We're the ones here feeling sad about it, but she's out. She got out. It was such an eternal mindset that I'm like, oh my word. She taught me more about my faith in her death, and I never met her, you know, like those sorts of things where you're like, gosh. But anyway, go on. What else?
Yeah, well, the other stuff was discussed already in this conversation about, you know, there is some pushy religious people who, you know, kind of tell you if it's my way or the highway, and instead of showing love or leading with love, they lead with, again, that like forced, you know, if you're wrong, you're going to hell, that kind of like scaring darkness, like you had mentioned, you know, being exclusive to certain types of people. We talked about that already. And I don't know, I've just, in the people that I've talked to that have faith that are different than Christians, say they're even Catholics, which, you know, they're very not interchangeable, but
Catholics are
but
Christian.
The Catholics I've talked to have some beef with Christians.
Oh, sure. Which is silly.
You know?
Yeah.
I know, but that's what I mean. And I don't like that. I don't like how people can say, you know, God is good, God is great, but my God is the right God, and your God,
the way,
or, you know, your Buddha or God, your whatever. And again, I don't want to like, I know this is mostly about Christianity, but like, you know, if someone is of a different faith, that they're wrong. And I don't like that, so because there's room for everyone, and there's room for the conversation, at least.
There needs to be. And that is the responsibility, any Christians, Catholics, anybody, believers watching this, that is our responsibility to be better at. But thank God for grace, because we are flawed people. We are a flawed people. And you should never look at a person as an example of a savior. You should look at Jesus, because he was perfect. He didn't do any of those things. Any of the things that you're describing, he didn't do them at all, not even close. So he's the one we should be looking to. We shouldn't be looking to my friend who's a Catholic or my friend who's a Christian or whatever. You're going to, like, we're not going to be able to represent it perfectly. It's kind of like, we're in network marketing. Well, I had a friend who was super pushy, and so therefore network marketing, I could never participate. It's like, well, that's lame. You just threw out the baby with the bathwater on that one, you know, like, because one person is representing an industry poorly, that's not representative of the industry. It's the same with Christianity. Because one person is representing it poorly, it is not representative of the faith as a whole, right? But it totally goes both ways. It's your job to not look to that person as the example and say, I don't want to be any part of that, because that's going to just cost you in the end. But it's our job as believers to be a better freaking example. Like, that's a whole nother book too. Like, be a better freaking example. Period.
I can get behind that full-heartedly. I mean, I think, leading by example instead of just being preachy about why people are wrong or why they're not.
And pride and insecurity. That's what you're describing, which are not, like, those are all things that are human, that are of the flesh, so to speak. And so we want to know we're doing it right. We're doing it right. So you're off a little bit, but I'm right. You know, that's our pride in us, which is sin. That's not
Right.
the good stuff, that's the bad stuff representative in us, you know? So it's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
unfortunate and it's pretty much unavoidable, but we can try harder.
It'll definitely be interesting to check out your book because
I'm excited about
having
it.
come, yeah, well, having come from a similar background, you know, having the same influences when we were younger,
Yeah.
um, you know, and honestly, the conversations I have had with you, you've been understanding and open-minded to other people's views. You know, like you haven't been
Sure.
like, here's why my view is right. And I appreciate that because that does open up
Yeah.
room in my heart and in my mind
Sure.
to go further down there. So, you know, I definitely think that that will be an
I've had
eye-opening read for
a
me.
lot of beliefs over the last even 10, 15 years of my life. Just the various stages of developing that picture, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's crazy, but yeah, I'm excited. Keep lookout for that book.
Yeah. So is that basically, is there any other end thoughts that we want to discuss?
You know, one thing too I wanted to just add that my husband did that I think was necessary, especially if you're talking to someone who just doesn't have any kind of foundation in Christianity, is interestingly enough way that you kind of started with a Bible study, which I think was after probably a lot of conversation between you and I. I don't think that was like your jumping
Mm-hmm.
off point, but
Yeah.
my husband, a lot of Christians lead with the Bible and lead with Jesus, which is fine, except for me, who didn't believe in Jesus, therefore didn't believe a lick of that book, was completely lost on me. And I'm like, I'll
Mm-hmm,
read
mm-hmm.
your stupid book, but I don't believe it. That's the problem. So my husband
It's
had,
not an easy book to
no, no,
read
no, no, no.
either.
I didn't even know there was any different kinds of translations. Like yeah, no, it's just, you pick it up and you're like, I'm sorry. He lived 900
Overwhelmed.
years and Noah and blah, blah, blah. I remember when I first started learning about the Bible, I'm like, everything I've ever heard about the Bible other than Jesus is in the first book, Genesis. Like Joseph and the Amazing
Yes.
Technicolor Dreamcoat, Noah, Abraham, Moses, like Adam and Eve. It's all in the first book. Like, what the heck is in the rest of this book? Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know anything. This is gonna be over. My extent of what I know is gonna be over real quick after this book's done. But he just started with, you know, what if you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. And after we went through that conversation a little bit, I said, well, what would you have me do? And he said, well, what could you have been created? He didn't say, could God have created you? He just said, could you have been created? Go think on that, you know? And that was such a great jumping off point for me because I didn't even believe that much. So I had to get there before I could even get to Jesus, before I could even get to the Bible. Do you know, like I just had to
Mm-hmm.
back way up to the beginning of, could you have been created? And that's when I went to go, well, let's look at the Big Bang Theory again. Let me look at evolution again and see if I think that's right. And, or, you know, what is the creation account? I don't even know it, you know? So I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, that's a good jumping off point. So maybe that's where you want to start if you're a person that's like, where do I
So
start?
basically one step at a time.
Yeah.
Don't dive in completely or else
Every step was
you'll
so
get right out.
overwhelming to me. Like every step was just like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like I know less. Like I would read all this stuff and then I'd be like, I know less now than I knew before. I just felt like I'm unlearning everything I thought I knew, and I'm not learning anything. I'm just being undone.
Or even as someone who is still exploring, you know, her faith, do a Bible study.
Totally.
Find, you know, ask some of your faith-filled friends. That's a fun word to say.
Faith-filled friends.
You know, if they have a Bible study they recommend, because you're right. I think that when you throw the big book at people, they're not going to understand, and it's overwhelming. But doing a Bible study allowed me to access it from like a theological standpoint,
Totally.
where I was also like, oh, I can just learn more about these things I've heard so much about.
Sure.
I didn't have to be fully on board
Sure.
with, did this happen? When did it happen? Is it because of Jesus? I just could read it, appreciate it, and comprehend what was happening.
Yeah, Seamless is a
So.
great study for that. Just to put the whole Bible into one story for you, and so you've got a little bit of a through line. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a history book. You know, like that study really helps you unpack like this is just a historical account of the Jewish people in the early days. You know what I mean? So like you're just
Right.
learning about history, and you know, we learn about the Holocaust. I use this in my book. We learn about the Holocaust. There's going to be a generation from now, there's not going to be one surviving person from the Holocaust. So we're going to have to believe the accounts of the people that were alive when it happened, and we likely won't question it at all because we don't question. I've never ever in my life spoken to a Holocaust survivor, but I don't question what happened at the Holocaust. Do you know what I mean? Because it's history, and like you just accept that as like self-correcting in a certain capacity. And you know, like there's enough people that were alive, they would have said that didn't happen like that, and it would have naturally corrected itself. So it becomes this, you know, collection of accounts that is history, right? I just, when I was thinking of it in that context, I'm like, dude, this is history. This is a collection of accounts. It's just like any other history book. Why am I like weird? Like this is Harry Potter magic, you know? We could
Well,
go
that's
on
a good place to wrap it up. We've already gone over on our time. You'll be on a plane next week, right, Wen? I think you're going to be out of town.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will, I will be taking over. We'll have a special guest, Amanda, with us, which is exciting. Her and I are going to talk about postpartum depression and some of the issues that women face postpartum. It's very not talked about, but just for all of y'all that look for Wendy's videos when we go live, it's going to be me that goes live. So if you're not connected with me on Facebook, if we're not friends, you can go to my profile and follow me, and then you'll get notified when we go live next week. So don't miss it. Same time, 1:30 Pacific time on Wednesday.
Cool, guys. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.